The Fujifilm X100VI has been on back order for the longest time since its release in February this year, and it's still back ordered. Fortunately, with enough patience, I finally got my hands on one. In this video, I share my experience of using this camera over the past month as a Sony fanboy. This camera has been hyped up a lot over these past couple months, so I got this camera to see if it's really that great. Or are people just buying and reselling this just to price gouge? Well, the truth may be a little bit of both. Over the past 9 years, I've used different cameras from different brands, including Fujifilm. The reason that I've returned to Fujifilm is because now I have a budget to get a camera that I could use for casual use to document my life. That's not my phone. Which means no more big camera bodies or big camera lenses for my day trips. Since using the X100VI, it has become part of my daily carry, and unlike my Sony cameras, I can just take it anywhere without sticking out like a sore thumb with this big old camera or being weighed down with a backpack full of heavy gear. Just taking this thing out and using it is just so quick and so seamless, just making the overall experience of using it simply a joy. In general, taking photos is quick and even quiet when you consider this mechanical shutter. Unlike other Fujifilm cameras, this actually provides a EVF and OVF, which is an electronic viewfinder and an optical viewfinder, similar to that of DSLRs. When I would take my Sony cameras, I would just be so heavily invested in the gear and being able to use these big old lenses, getting the best image quality that I could possibly get while still being tied down and all these camera gear on my back. Forget all that, because since taking this guy around, I've just been able to put it in my sling bag and just take it out easily, turn it on, shoot, turn it off, and throw it back in my bag, and no one would think that I'm out there with this expensive camera in my hand. I'm still able to go ahead and capture my life and capture the things that are in front of me while still having a great image quality that my phone just can't compare. If you've ever heard about Fujifilm colors, you've heard how much the community just loves them. As a Sony fanboy, I can't disagree with them either. The film simulations are just great to use, and the thing that I really love about it is that the images just look so great out of camera. My favorite is Kodak Portra 400. Once in a while I use Superior, but most of the time I'm just stuck with Portra 400. I love it. Behind this fixed lens is an APS-C sensor, similar to that of something like my Sony FX30. For some people, they want a full frame sensor, and that's okay. I respect that. But for many people, APS-C sensor is big enough. It's bigger than your phone, it's bigger than action cameras, it's bigger than a 1-inch sensor, it's bigger than Micro Four Thirds. For me, it's plenty enough. I don't need this big old full frame sensor, and I don't need a big old full frame lens either. In front of the sensor is a fixed 35mm full frame equivalent lens at f2. So it's gonna be good in low light, and at the same time, it's good for a compact size. It's almost like a pancake lens. Now, although this is a fixed lens, I could go ahead and use one of Fujifilm's adapters and mount it on top with this TCL adapter. This is pretty much an adapter that will thread onto the front of this camera, and it will make the overall focal length a 50mm full frame equivalent, and that's the kind of focal length that I like to use for portraits. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of bulk, but still, it's better than having to digitally zoom or have to crop in later. It just saves my overall workflow. But one of my favorite things about this camera is not just simply the accessories that I can go ahead and dress this guy up in, but it's just being able to turn this guy on and just give it over to my family and friends to be able to take pictures and not have to overwhelm them with like, oh, there's this big DSLR camera, there's this big Sony camera, it's a big lens. Now this, they just take it, take shots, look at their photos and be like, wow, that was pretty good. People just love using their phones because of how easy and how not intimidating it is. So having something like this just also encourages not only me, but encourages my peers to be able to take photos, well, of me, because I'm stuck taking photos. But with all jokes aside, the way that I end up setting this is not exactly too automatic, but I end up leaving my aperture stuck at f2. I change my shutter speed and usually leave it around like 250 or maybe 4000 depending on the setting. And then I keep my ISO to 103 auto ISO preset ranges. And then I allow for a half press autofocus, but I prefer a back button focus. And I just tell people to use either or. Now for the most part, I'm just using this camera as a stills camera, not for video. But I did kind of dabble with it, and I do appreciate that for a photo first camera, this does allow for true 24p, as well as having a 1/48 second shutter speed. Pretty neat. Not even other dedicated video cameras from Sony have that kind of setting. In terms of being able to grade an F-log, I had no issues with it. For the most part, again, just gonna use this for stills. In addition to all the customization with film simulations and the way that Fujifilm cameras are practically made, Fuji practically encourages you to customize their bodies. This thing comes with a missing shutter button, or at least allows you to put on your own shutter button. I've taken the liberty to go ahead and add a camera skin on top of it. This one in particular is from AlphaGuard, and the design is the Nocturnal Waves designed by Atola Visuals. Thank you very much, Kitty, for that. This is dope. I've added a thumb grip here that goes to the cold shoe and just allows me to better handle my camera. But also on the right hand side, I've attached this foul cam grip that gives me more room for my pinky just to be able to get a nice solid handle on my costly camera. But even if the body is customized well and the images look excellent, does this mean that it's reliable? Well, in terms of doing casual work, absolutely. But if you want to bring this into a more professional setting, one thing to note is that it only has one SD card slot. Generally, I like to have 2 SD card slots for any professional work because I'm just not in the business of explaining to clients, hey, your images were lost because my one SD card was just corrupted. Debate that how you will. All I know is it's not gonna be me explaining to clients what happened. That's all on you if you want to do that. On a day-to-day basis, when I'm capturing my daily life, all I know is that I got one SD card and that's good enough, and I got one single battery that'll do the trick, because if I'm just shooting stills, the battery life will last all day. And although this battery is rated for 450 photos, I probably only wind up taking 100, maybe 200, the max. But if I do end up shooting some video clips, even if it's for like a couple seconds, I notice that I do end up needing a second battery just because it just dies faster. I took a couple of clips out in New York City, but somehow midway through my 2 or 3 hour trip, I just had to switch my battery. Besides the SD card slot, here's more things that I dislike about this camera. Another dislike that I have is for this lens ring. I wish there was a little bit more customizability. Yes, it gives you the ability to do things like zoom or change like film simulations, or yes, of course, focus. But after I realized that the digital zoom quality is really not that great despite having 40 megapixels, whether you're zooming in on a camcorder, your Sony camera, or even this camera, digital zoom is just, it's gonna make your image look like a potato. You're better off just taking a large picture and just cropping it in later. Fuji gives us the ability to customize this ring, but for me, I feel like it's kind of useless because I don't use it for manual focus. If anything, I wish it was kind of like a hybrid of what Sony does, which is that DMF mode, which is where it has autofocus, and then when you change your focus ring or use your focus ring, or you know, rack focus left or right, it starts to change and lock onto different subjects as you wish. But hey, I mean, I get it. That's a Sony thing, just putting it out there. But of all the things that I dislike about this camera, it's the price. It's $1,599 US. Considering the previous negatives, I wish this camera just had a little bit more extra for the price that we're paying. Make things a little bit faster in processing. Give us more customizability with the lens ring. Those things I can live without. But if I'm paying for $1,600 worth of camera equipment, this body better give me a second SD card slot. Personally, I would prefer that over a 40 megapixel sensor. And this camera itself, body with a fixed lens, costs more than other Fujifilm cameras with 2 SD card slots. You don't even gotta make the second SD card slot fast, or any of them fast. Just give me a second SD card slot and we'd be good. Then like without a doubt, like this would be an ultimate recommendation, or one of the most ultimate recommendations that I could have for anybody. I mean, we're already limited with one lens. I get it, it's great, thank you very much. But a second SD card would be quite handy. With that said, who's really gonna buy this camera? This is for people who really love photography and don't want to spend a lot of time editing. If anything, they want to get back into that love of shooting film without the hassle of processing and printing. But of course you can go out there and print your digital images, especially out of this 40 megapixel sensor. All in all, for the price, yes, I wish certain things were better with this camera. But the Fujifilm X100VI is worth it if you want to keep a small form factor while still being able to take some of the best images you can get straight out of camera. I'm gonna keep mine and continue to pick this up over my Sony cameras for the everyday stuff. But if you don't wanna wait for this camera to get off of back order and arrive at your front door, or even the X100VI, well, go ahead and check out this alternative right here.